Alumni Society Board, Ellen S. Zimmerman.
Thank you, Amy Jo. Hello, everyone, and welcome on behalf of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences Alumni Society Board to Winter Gardening with Dr. Tim McDermott. I am Ellen S. Zimmerman, and I serve on the CFAES Alumni Society Board of Directors as the Agricultural, Communication, Education, and Leadership Department Representative. I'm also the Fellowship Committee Chair. The CFAES Alumni Society Board presents the voice of all CFAES alumni and serves as a resource for relations between the college alumni and the University Alumni Association. The Fellowship Committee works to bring engaging events such as this webinar to the larger CFAES Alumni Society. I am thrilled to introduce an outstanding OSU alumnus and the speaker of our webinar today. Dr. Timothy McDermott has been an agriculture and natural resources extension educator within the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences for the past 4 years after 20 years in private practice veterinary medicine and surgery. He assists client, resident backyard growers, community gardeners, teacher educators, and urban farmers increase their production of fresh, local produce through his work and local food production systems in Franklin County. He utilizes his veterinary expertise for extension work in backyard poultry, small ruminant, insect vector disease, and companion animal programming to client residents, the Department of Veterinary Preventative Medicine, and 4-H Student Livestock Project Education. He's a proud member of Buckeye Nation as a 96th grad of the OSU College of Veterinary Medicine. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. McDermott.
Thanks, Ellen. As an alumnus and donor to CFAES, it is my pleasure to be here. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this third and final webinar in our gardening series. We're going to be talking about growing over winter. All right, gang. So I guess my first question is what do we all have growing still? Hopefully you have stuff in production right now. I was really worried because last week, about a week ago from tomorrow, we were due to have a pretty cold overnight here in Franklin County. It was scheduled to get down to maybe 36, 38, which isn't really frost all the way, but my community garden is at the bottom of a hill and I'm in a frost pocket. And so I harvested pretty hard, but I left a whole bunch of stuff on the plants, and I didn't yank the plants out yet, and thank goodness it did not frost. And now we're looking at 2 weeks of great growing weather. So what do you have growing right now? Maybe you have some stuff, still got some veg in the ground. Maybe you've pulled some stuff out, you're thinking of some cover crops. I actually have stuff under my lights that I'm going to get ready and transplant because I want to grow all 12 months out of the year. And I'm going to get started with getting more stuff in the ground coming up shortly. So I notice we have some chat questions popping in there. I am happy to jump into the chat and address any questions that you might have. I'll probably go up about every 3, 4, 5 slides and make sure. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to try to get to everybody's questions. But it looks like we got lots of production still in there. Outstanding. Tomatoes. We're transitioning to our cool weather crops. Just pulled the sweet potatoes. Yep, it's sweet potato harvest time, gang. Get them out of the ground. But there's lots of ways that you can grow. The key is to grow outside over winter. You want to match your cold tolerant choices in what you plant with some season extension. And by using that season extension, you get to maximize your production in all 12 months out of the year, all 4 seasons here in Ohio, because Ohio is a 4-season growing environment. I grow and harvest all 12 months out of the year. And after this, I hope you all give it a chance as well. But that is key in terms of what you do, right? Cold tolerant plantings with season extension. So when we talk about season extension, it's just like it sounds. We want to grow something into a time period where it is not normally grown. we're going to be talking about season extension into the cold weather today, but there could be season extension into the hot weather too, right? Maybe you talk about shade fabrics and keeping your cool season stuff going into June or July. The tool in my toolbox that I use the most for season extended plantings into the cool weather is row cover. And we've talked about that a little bit before in some of our other classes we had, but row cover is a innovation out of the nursery and landscape industry. It is a spun bonded fabric that comes in multiple weights. It has very lightweight, almost like an insect barrier, medium weights to heavy weights, things that are much more protective of the cold. We're talking frost blankets. And the trade-off that you get is the lightest fabric is the most permeable to sunlight, but it doesn't provide as much frost protection. The heaviest weights provide the most frost protection, but they let less sunlight in. The thing that I love about them is they're permeable. So when it rains or when it snows, that moisture can drip down through and irrigate my plantings, and oxygen gets to move through that. So what happens is when you get that really hot day that we get every month, bright sunshine, if you're using plastic only, and I do use plastic as one of the tools in my toolbox. If I have a really, really cold snap over some tender stuff, I'll throw plastic on top of my row cover. But if you use plastic alone, you have to make sure you're watching it carefully, because a really sunny day, once we get into the winter, believe it or not, it can get warm under that plastic, and it can get actually warm enough that it will impact those plants negatively. So I like to say, when we're talking about row cover versus plastic, while I use both of those tools in my toolbox, row cover is more like a cat. If you're going to leave for the weekend with a cat, you can clean the litter box really good, give them a pile of food, leave for several days, and you're fine. You come back, everything's fine. Doesn't need as close of monitoring. Plastic is like a dog, an old dog that needs pills. You got to check it twice a day, and nobody really wants to do that for you. But both of them are effective tools, and that is how we are going to get some extra time for growth outside deep into the winter. So what does best, right? Besides season extension, the other key to this is picking crops that are cold tolerant, even cold hardy. We're talking our leafy greens. We're talking almost all the brassica leafy greens, kales and spinaches, collards, bok choys, root vegetables, carrots, turnips, beets, radishes. They do well. Green onions would do fine planted. There's a bunch of herbs that are cold tolerant that I like to cover. Plus, I'll honestly cover my tender herbs with row cover, things like my rosemary, things I want to keep over winter. A lot of these things can do fine under cover for extended period of time because most of these cold tolerant plantings are not pollinator dependent, right? You're going to harvest them before they would ever go to flower and need a pollinator to do their work. So make sure you match your cold tolerant plantings with effective season extension, and you would be surprised how long you can extend the harvest. And we have a beneficial time period coming up. So I talked about the next couple weeks have nice weather, right? 60s during the day, 45 overnight. For the most part, no frost coming. I'm hoping to keep my peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes rolling until the end of the month. But when we look at our future track and the NOAA weather predictive models, they have updated them recently, and they're predicting above average temperatures all the way deep into December. So that is going to make sure that Mother Nature's cooperating a little bit and we get a little bit of some extra plantings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate the technique that I use, and I'm going to use my favorite crop to plant over winter, and that is spinach. I am a huge fan of spinach. I don't think that my younger self would have said that when I was a little kid, but now I love it. I love it in all forms. I love it cooked. I love it raw in salads. Spinach is a great choice for overwintered plantings because it is extremely cold hardy, and it even does a nice thing. When spinach gets exposed to that severe cold, what it does is it actually changes the components of its vascular sap, the fluid inside the spinach. It increases the sugar content. That almost acts like an antifreeze. That makes it taste even better once it gets a little cold on it, right? Because a lot of you guys, if you're growing, if you're growing things like cabbages or broccolis or kales, you'll notice that after they get a little bit of cold weather nipping them, they taste a little bit better, a little bit more sweet. So this is a bed right now, and I'm going to play this as a little time-lapse video of me converting a bed into a spinach bed. I did this on October 13th, about 3 years ago is when I shot this video. This was planted in the spring in carrots and green onions, and then planted in the summer in green beans. And then what I did is I simply removed that organic matter and I raked it flat to create a seed bed. Then I planted the spinach seeds by broadcast, and then I raked them in, and then I covered that with row cover. And I'm going to go back a little bit to show you the method that I used. I put screws into the form at about a 45-degree angle. This is 1/2-inch PVC. This is a 4-foot wide bed, so I cut the PVC about 4 inches, 5 inches longer so that it makes a bow. I like to make sure that I am propping my row cover off of my plants because I need a microclimate underneath this row cover. I need to make sure that I'm allowing a place where passive heat generation can build up, because that's what's going to help those plants survive, that microclimate that exists under the row cover. If you have the row cover touching your plants, if that row cover gets wet, you have a thermal transfer area. And even though these plants are super cold hardy, what can happen is if they get chilled because you have that thermal transfer, you can actually frost burn them because of that. So the next thing I did is I covered it with frost blanket. Now, it didn't really need it at that time for temperature. The reason why I covered it was this is when I was working in Hocking County several years ago, and I didn't want predators to go through. I didn't want deer walking through it or groundhogs trying to mess with it. I didn't want cats using it as a litter box. I covered it immediately, and what you'll notice is I put slight tension, but not crazy tension, in my row cover over it, and then I weight my row cover down. I use bricks all the way around the outside. I don't build my PVC hoops really, really tall, because if the wind catches them, I don't want it to be like a sail that rips my row cover off. I'm generally trying to get about 18 inches above the plants, enough to get a great microclimate and enough to keep that row cover from touching the plants. Okay. So spinach is a finicky germinator on its best germinating day. It was watered in. I don't generally irrigate my row cover other than that first initial watering. The nice thing about fall and winter is, unlike summer, we generally have pretty good precipitation. I guess I would water if I needed to. The nice thing about row cover is you don't have to take it off to water your plants underneath it, right? Because water drips on through it. You can actually irrigate, and you guys know I don't really talk about overhead irrigation, but when you have row cover that is going to make a gentle dripping of that water on top of it, you can basically water right on top of the row cover, and it will percolate through that. So we're about 2 weeks after planting, not even, and we got some good germination, right? Spinach is a dicot. You can see that we got our first 2 seed leaves up, and we're thinking about putting our true leaves out. Okay, we've got some chat questions. Can I, Cynthia asks, can I grow year-round in Zone B? I live a couple miles from Lake Erie. Yes, you can. The lake generally provides a pretty good microclimate all its own. You're going to have a warmer time period into fall, contrasting to the fact that then the lake is going to store a bunch of cold up, and you're going to have a cooler start to your season. But with these cool season crops and some season extension, you should be good. Judy asked, should you leave an edge at the side of row cover so plants don't hit the row cover? Yeah, you can. You can do that, and that way you know that those plants aren't going to be just, they're going to sprout just to die. All right, in that October 27th pick of your spinach, why did you put straw in there? Maureen, I actually did not put straw in there. That was left over from the spring and summer. In this picture right here, I did not get all of it removed when I did my bed cleanup. Susan asks, I'm still producing tomatoes. Should I pull them? Susan, I'd leave them. If the plants are producing good tomatoes, at least here in Central Ohio, we have a 2-week time window where we are still going to have favorable temperatures. And boy, I'm going to miss them when they're gone. So I'm keeping my plants alive, and I'm still harvesting, hoping to get another week or 2 of growth. Good questions, gang. Okay, November 15th. We are basically 1 month from that, and I have my row cover on there. In fact, I got some other plantings down here in a different raised bed that are overwintered. So let's take a look under our row cover. The first thing you'll notice that I want you guys to do whenever you pop the top, first off, don't pop your top unless the weather is nice. You know, you want it at least 48, 50, 55 degrees, and we get those days. We'll get them in December, we'll get them in January. The next thing you'll notice that I did is when I took the cover up, I rolled it so that I wasn't going to drip any dust or leaves or dirt or anything in here, because these are really clean leaves, right? They have a cover on top of them that's keeping a lot of stuff from splashing up on them. And you have a really nice product under this. So look at this picture. We are 1 month into this, and believe it or not, you can start harvesting right now. Those baby spinach leaves, I would harvest pretty good. Maybe one leaf per plant, the largest one. You want to leave enough photosynthetic leaf mass on there. The plants can keep growing. But quite honestly, there's a couple of Kroger bags that can come out of this. So you've extended your harvest a month already. Okay, we got some Q&As. Aaron writes, where's the best place to get row cover? Aaron, I get mine from Amazon. I buy it in bulk. I don't have a specific vendor. There's numerous companies that make row cover, and I basically look for whatever company is offering it. We had a little run on a lot of the gardening products early on because, you know, if there was one sort of silver lining with our 2020 is the number of people that got into growing really was impressive to me, and we really had a lot of people producing their own food. But you can get row cover now, at least the last time I checked. They had pretty good stocks on it. So I do Amazon, I get it in bulk, and then I cut it because it's less expensive if you can do it that way. And Melissa asked, Tim, do you ever do any accelerating ripening techniques like hard pruning or root pruning on tomatoes at the end of the season? So Melissa, that's a great question. If you wanted to do pruning of the terminal or the growing end of a indeterminate tomato, you could do that now. If you wanted to prune on the clusters, maybe some of the smaller ones on the end, then you could do that as well, and that might speed ripening. Keep in mind, tomatoes ripen from the inside out. So when we get really close to that temperature, I grab every tomato that I think might even have a chance of ripening. And you'd be surprised. They might ripen 3 weeks later, but then I'm eating them in November, which is great. Hey, Joe, what is the best weight of row cover? The best weight depends on your use, right? So if you're using it for a insect barrier, you want very light. If you're doing overwintered plantings, like we're doing now, you want the heaviest weight that they have, and that's generally labeled as frost blanket. Okay, good job, gang. Good job. We got some chat questions too. Okay. So Aaron, best place, we got that one. Do you have issues with weeds under the row covers? Do you do periodic weeding? Hey, Wendy, I don't generally have issues of weeds. In fact, I'm going to go back to this picture and I'm going to show you guys something. Take a look. There had been some weeds that had sprouted, but a lot of the weeds that we have problems with are more warm weather or summer weeds. So they sprouted because I turned the soil over a little bit, raked it, and then watered it. But then they died. Because even under the row cover, they were not happy with the fact that we had multiple frosts that took the weather down. So I generally have no problems with weeds until spring, because then this is a protective environment that I pre-warmed, and I'll show you in a picture down the line. Underneath this row cover, the weeds are sprouting come spring, right when I'm doing my final harvests. So, and one other thing I want to stress is I'm getting good growth underneath this row cover right here. I did not fertilize this for 2 reasons. One, this was filled with pure compost and I soil tested it, so I knew my fertility was awesome. And 2, the plant that preceded this spinach was green beans. And when I took the green beans out, I left a lot of the root in there with the nodules on them. So I had some nitrogen in place because green beans are a legume. But if you're going to plant over winter, make sure, like every other planting, when you're doing fruit, veg, and herbs, the majority of those, especially if they're going to be around for a while, you need to match the fertility to the plant. Okay. Then I'm watching the weather, and we're another few weeks down the line here in Logan, Ohio. I'm checking my phone. I am checking the weather. I don't mind 53 and 27. I don't even mind 47 and 23 at night. I have frost blanket on spinach, but once we start looking in the teens, 18, 19, 17 overnight, I am doubling up on my row cover. I would have probably doubled up on my row cover earlier if I had lettuce underneath that bed, or if I had arugula underneath that bed, or if I had, say, bok choy underneath that bed, because they're not as cold tolerant as, say, spinach or kale. But that bed was a monocrop of spinach. So when you are evaluating when do we put that frost blanket on, when do we throw a little more frost blanket on, when do we, put a little bit of plastic on it, you got a polar vortex showing up and you have something like a bok choy, or you have a lettuce or arugula, you're putting everything but the kitchen sink on top of that, because while they're cold tolerant, they're not cold hardy bomb proof like spinach or kale. And so I check daily my weather, just like you guys do. We're farmers, we grow food, we are weather watchers. When you need to throw that extra on there, go for it. If you are unsure of whether you should throw it on or not, do it, because row cover is permeable. It should not overheat tremendously underneath there. Okay, December 9th. This was December 7th, and once we got to that Wednesday, Thursday, I doubled up. So a second layer of row cover on there, and we're getting into winter, and we can get some crazy winds and things coming up. So I have my row cover on there, and I have bricks on there. I never use those push pins to hold my row cover down. I never use anything sharp to hold my row cover down. I try to baby it. This is a product I spent a bunch of money on. I like it to last for a long time. I try to use soft edged things to hold it down firmly, because I don't want to get a tear in it. Once you get a tear in it, it's difficult to try to repair it. And once there's a hole in it, it is not going to hold that temperature the way you like. So take good care of your row cover, and it'll take good care of you. December 9th, January 16th. So if you guys remember 3-4 years ago, we had not a horrible winter in general, but right around the holidays, we had a period about 4 weeks of brutal weather, including a polar vortex. This spinach is under double row cover. Now, it's covered with about 4 to 6 inches of snow right now, but that's not a problem. In fact, that's a good thing. Snow is your buddy when you have a low tunnel covering a crop. Snow's like an insulating blanket, believe it or not. Think of like an igloo. This is not hurting those plants whatsoever. Sunlight can still get through this. Not that they need a lot, right? They're in a very slow growth rate. This is another reason why I don't really water. These plants are growing very slowly. Cold tolerant plants have the ability to do that. They are growing when we have the smallest amount of daylight and the least amount of light intensity. Where I worry isn't with snow. I worry with things like freezing rain and ice, because that can weigh a lot, and that is not providing a thermal blanket like snow is. All right, but take a look at this. You guys, Ohio weather never fails to amaze and amuse me. January 16th, 4 to 6 inches of snow, unbelievably cold. January 22nd. Now, you would never pop the top when it's like this, or even close to this, or even remotely close to this, because everything underneath that would die. The row cover's frozen, you'd rip it, the entire system would go down. But on January 22nd, a few days later, it had spiked temperatures to like low 50s. When I pop the top on a nice day, I try to do it as close to noon as I can, because in the morning, you still might have some serious cold around, and the row cover might have been frozen from overnight. And in the evening, you might not allowing enough time to reestablish the warmth underneath in the microclimate. So close to noon, I'm checking. So January 22nd, 6 days later, same thing. Roll the row cover up so you don't drop any yucky stuff in there. You'll notice I'm in my shirt sleeves, okay? Look at that growth, crazy, right? This is a nice time to take a big harvest off this. I would take multiple Kroger bags. I would take 30% of this out of there, because what we find is once we start to get that warm up, okay, I'm trying to get in there at least once a month, December, January, February. Once we get into March and April, we have warmer temperatures, we have much more daylight, we have much more sun intensity. This stuff takes off like a rocket. It grows rapidly. And here's a really interesting thing. Remember when I told you through the crop rotations for these plantings, the spring planting was carrots and green onions. Carrots and green onions are some of those cold tolerant plantings that actually do pretty well. We have a carrot that sprouted and we have a green onion that sprouted, and they persisted through the polar vortex. They had just been in there from when I originally planted them, and maybe I planted them too deep to germinate and then stir that up a little bit. So here's what I talk about in the spring. Here's April 9th. One, we have some weeds that have sprouted up in there and they're growing in and amongst the spinach. And this is, you almost can't harvest it fast enough or hard enough. You really get so much out of this. This was a 4x8 raised bed, and I got tens of pounds of spinach out of this over the growing season. And here's another thing. You know, when you go to the store and you buy a bag of spinach and you get those little baby leaves and they taste great, but if you have ever tasted spinach that you grew that was allowed to kind of get mature and get these big leaves. These leaves are big, they're sweet, they've grown and matured in the cold weather, they're thick, they're like crunchy. It is a totally different product, right? We all know that it tastes better when you grow it yourself, but let me tell you, you get these big overwintered spinach leaves that you're harvesting in like March and April. They're amazing. They taste unbelievable. All right, let's pop into the chat. Bump in chat. Is there a list of veggies you would do here or over winter with row cover? Stephanie asks. So the list is basically most of the cold weather non-pollinated veg. You're talking spinach, you're talking kale, you're talking collards, you're talking bok choy, lettuces, arugulas. You're talking maybe green onions, some root vegetables like carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, all the same stuff that you're thinking about planting in March, you plant now to mature into the cold weather. So Martha asked, what's a quick way to soil test? Martha, contact your extension educator in whatever county you are in, and they will be able to assist you with getting a soil test pulled. In Franklin County, if you are a Franklin County resident, we sell soil tests out of our office by appointment. They cost like 11 or 12 bucks. You buy the kit, you go home, you do a soil sampling out of your bed, you put it in a baggie and you mail it off. And then when the test comes back, you get the results, we get the results. And then if you need any help looking at them, we're happy to do that. So each county in Ohio, all 88 have an extension office and they can help you no matter where you're at. All right, Regina says, I'm going to plant spinach in a bed that I grew cabbage in. What should I add to the bed? Blood meal or bone meal? I guess I would probably put a little bit of both maybe in, you know, because your blood meal is going to put mostly nitrogen in there. Your bone meal is going to get more of that phosphorus, potassium. Both of them are probably going to have a little bit of the macro and micronutrients in there. Alternately, you could put a, you know, just a sort of slow release organic granular fertilizer, which is honestly made of blood meal and bone meal. And then can you put a clear plastic tub with holes over lettuce and row cover over the tub? You probably could. I've never done that, but go for it. See what happens. I like to take risks when I plant, right? Because I like to say that seeds are cheap and vegetables cost money. So plant and then tell us all how it did. All right, my raised beds are surrounded by 18-inch high bunny fence. Could I drape row cover over the bunny fence rather than building the frame you show? Judy, probably. Just make sure that that fence isn't sharp. If you have sharp edges, and a lot of bunny fence kind of has a sharp edge, you don't want that edge to rip the row cover, and it can fatigue over time. You just don't want to get a tear in it. You might want to, maybe if you could put something that would kind of soften that edge would be good. All right, Christine asked in the Q&A, when you roll back your cover to harvest, do you try to leave part of it covered as you work through the bed to preserve warmth, or do you completely remove it? Christine, if it's a nice enough, first off, I'm not opening that cover unless it is a nice enough day for me to open the cover, and which means that I can open a part of it or open all of it. So if I was gonna go in there and harvest, I'm probably going to roll it very carefully away over the whole bed so that I can selectively scissor harvest through the whole bed. How much spinach seed would you use in a 4x4 bed? You know, I don't have a number where I can give you number of seeds or how much of a weight. You want to get seed so that you have a spinach plant about every 3 or 4 inches away from each other. But I overplant a little bit my spinach seed because it is only really an 85% germinator on its best day. So probably a half a packet would be fine, and then save the other half to replant in a different 4x4 bed in spring, like March 15th, to have another couple months of spinach harvest. And then Nancy says, is it possible to grow kale without a row cover? And Nancy, it is, but it's completely out of our control if it's going to be a successful year. I grew my kale last year without a row cover, but last winter was unbelievably mild outside. I was here working at Waterman on campus, and I had honeybees flying around in January. We actually had, it seemed like, more cold weather in April or May than we had in January or December. And then Janine asked, at what temp is it safe to uncover? Janine, I like it to be probably 45 to 48 or higher, and ideally a sunny day. If it's a cloudy day, I might like it closer to 50 because I need the heat to build back up. If it's a sunny day, I might go under there at 45. Okay, so now you're saying, Tim, I have a container garden. Can I grow spinach over winter in my container garden? And heck yeah, you can, for the most part, meaning that containers don't really have the thermal mass an in-ground raised bed would have. But I grew container spinach over winter last year in my container garden, and it did great. This the soil level here in this container is down about 6 or 8 inches, which is why I had this stretch tot, because the spinach could grow and it's not touching this row cover. And I put mine in late. We had a very mild fall last year. I put mine in Thanksgiving weekend after I got back home from grandma's, but I was out in the front yard kicking a soccer ball with my nieces and nephews because it was very warm that weekend. Spinach can germinate in very cold temperatures. My target for planting my spinach here shortly is going to be in the next week or two to get my my container garden planted with spinach. I put it in last year just because I found some seed lying around and I tried it as an experiment. So what else to do in winter, right? We want to keep our ground planted. We talked about cover crops in the last class. Make sure that you keep it planted. If you can do cover crops, great. If you can't, shredded leaves, hay, straw, whatever you can put on the ground. You want to avoid bare ground. Don't lose your nutrients, don't lose your organic matter. And then clean your seed starting area. So a lot of folks ask, what can I bring in over winter and put under my lights? I'm very hesitant to do that, me personally, because I start so many seeds. When a plant has been out in the wild world and you bring it indoors, it might have some travelers on it. And I don't want to bring things like spider mites or whiteflies or thrips or other bugs that are going to come in, because my seed starting area is where I start baby seeds. It's like a baby seed ICU. So I don't like to bring plants in over winter under my lights. And then make spring plans, right? We always talk about this season's planning makes next season's harvest. So I'm already thinking about, what am I going to grow next spring? And then keep growing something. And you can grow indoors as well as outdoors through winter. And so when I'm making my spring plans and I'm using my seed starting kit, I'm watching that weather as closely as I'm watching it now, because if we get a mild spring, and we get mild springs sometimes, we'll see what we get this year. We have a La Nina spring, and while that doesn't make the temperature necessarily warmer or colder, it does increase the precipitation, which means the ground might not be workable. But in spring of 2018, we had a crazy mild spring, and we've had them before that. So if I'm doing my weather watching and I'm doing my future predicting, and I see that 3 months or 2 months from now, they're predicting a much warmer time frame, I take a chance. I am planting some seedlings under my lights. And in this case, these were plants that were put outside in February and harvested in March, simply because we were able to get that done with our weather. It was just so much more mild that way. Contrast that with this year, right? You didn't want to be planting early in terms of your summer crops this year, because this year our last hard freeze was May 12th, and last year our last hard freeze was April 2nd. That's a big difference. Okay, so for your early season spring extension, it's exactly like this season spring extension, but in a forward direction, but same basic principles. So when you are looking at your weather in January and February, and you're getting all your seed catalogs and you're itching to plant something and you got some lights, think about what you can plant that you might be able to get outside under your row cover. And you can set up row cover, you can set up the hoops and put plastic, and you can pre-warm that area so that when you have plants ready to go in the ground, you've increased that temperature under. And then you wait until you have the opportunity to plant, right? You still don't want to pop the top until you have a good weather window to do that. But a lot of these same exact crops that we're talking about planting now to harvest over winter are the ones that you're going to plant in the winter to get in early in the spring and go forward. Cold tolerant and cold hardy spring plantings that do not need pollinators. Okay, so when to plant, that is weather dependent. We'll see what Mother Nature gives us. I have not seen anything that really predicts next year other than traditional La Nina for central Ohio, where I am at, is variable in terms of hot or cold, but it generally can mean extra precipitation. And remember, you plant in the soil, you plant your plants and your seeds in your soil, so you have to make sure you're monitoring soil temperatures and not necessarily air temperatures. But I do tell folks, right? Take a risk. Seeds are cheap, vegetables cost money. So if I see a potential planting window, I'm gonna put a couple of 6-packs of spinach and maybe a couple 6-packs of lettuce, a couple 6-packs of arugula, and I'm hoping to get them out in February or maybe March and get that fresh harvest all 12 months of the year, gang, right? So a lot of growing in Ohio is done indoors with hydroponics. And this is actually a picture taken at a greenhouse that is in Champaign County. And this is a corporation called Old Souls, and they grow hydroponic greens under glass 12 months out of the year. This is taken at the Howlett greenhouse here on campus, and they're growing right now. They're growing tomatoes, they're growing cucumbers, they're growing all of these things. Now I know it's beyond the scope of everybody to be able to grow with their own greenhouse inside, but boy, there's been some really cool tech innovations that have happened that allow us now to grow inside over the winter using LED lightings or maybe some basic hydroponic setups, right? This is the coolest thing, and I saw this just recently. This is a NFT system, and that stands for Nutrient Film Technique, and that is basically the same thing as this. And what this is like a gutter. It's a channel, and the plants are planted where their roots are suspended in this, and they pump a nutrient solution at the top, and it just trickles down like a little river, and it bathes the plant's roots in oxygen, water, and nutrients, and that's how they grow. Beyond the scope of most, but if you take a look at this is 6 by 6 and 3 feet tall. I'm trying to think of how do I convince my wife that we need to get rid of some of the stuff in the basement so I can put me a Crop King NFT system in there. Fill this up with nutrient solution, hang an LED light over it, and I'm growing 36 heads of lettuce or bok choy or arugula or basil or something like that in my basement over winter. Talk about modifying seasonal affective disorder. I can tell you right now, very few things are better than going into your office when it's dark and cold outside and seeing LED lights with green growing things under it. Much smaller scale, but really, really cool. And I know these might not fit into every budget, but there's a whole host of different systems that you can purchase that are extremely easy to use that will allow you to grow indoors, buying one of these things and putting it on your countertop. Scott's Miracle-Gro makes AeroGardens, a whole bunch of different sizes of these things. I use them. I really, really like it. I took this picture a couple seasons ago of a bunch of lettuce growing that I was harvesting just tons of this. I was getting like a Kroger bag every couple of weeks off of this scissor harvesting lettuce. Am I ever going to come close to the price points of you buying lettuce, from the store? No, we're never going to get there. This is more of a luxury item, but the innovations in hydroponics and LED lighting and how they're adjusting nutrient systems have just been exponentially growing. And I think we're going to find that in the not too distant future, this is going to be available and financially doable for a lot of folks to be able to grow indoors to provide a stream of fresh local produce that you grew yourself indoors using some of these hydroponic methods. In fact, they actually have, and this is the coolest thing, they have a hybrid variety of cherry tomato that you can grow in this system, and it made an insane amount of cherry tomatoes. It was unbelievable. All right, so I'm going to bop up and I'm going to, I see we have a ton of questions in the Q&A and we have a ton of questions in the chat. But before I do that, maybe Amy Jo, did you want to just let folks know about the survey or about that? So in case anybody who doesn't want to stay for the chat might get the sort of that end of the gardening series housekeeping. All right, we're gonna start talking chat questions till we get Amy Jo back. Okay, going up. So Amy Jo sent me a chat question. I've been thinking about taking cuttings of some more interesting peppers before the really cold weather sets in. So I guess, Chris, if you wanted to take some cuttings and you wanted to root them and keep them going, you really need to make sure that you are providing sort of an outdoor growing environment inside, because peppers are warm season, peppers need lots of light, but give it a try, right? The worst thing that happens is it doesn't work. But if you don't do it, it's not going to work either. And then let us know how it goes. So Cynthia says, wild turkeys ate most of the ground cover I planted this fall soon after germination. Is it okay to cover with leaves? Yes. Ideally, Cynthia, you would shred those leaves because then they'll break down easier in the spring. Leaves can kind of mat over when they're laid down whole, but leaves are an amazing organic matter supplement. They have, believe it or not, more nutrients in them per pound than manure. I love leaves. All right, Maureen asked, do you use seed starter mix for the plants you start under light? Yes, I do. Maureen, when I start plants under my lights, I use soilless mix for seed starting because I want to make sure I'm not having any diseases in there. If I am planting out in my containers and I'm direct seeding, I do seed starter in the top inch, just like you said. I basically make a germination layer on the top inch so that I can make sure those seeds have good germination. And then how do they pollinate indoors? Great question, Jay. So believe it or not, giant greenhouses, and Ohio is giant in the greenhouse industry, they actually will, for the super largest ones, they will have beehives inside. But when we look at like peppers and tomatoes, they actually have tools that when we were pollinating, and you pollinate daily, you actually, it would buzz like a bee, and you would buzz that on every flower cluster. And keep in mind that tomatoes and peppers are also wind pollinated, and smaller operations will go through with like a backpack blower and just blow wind up and down the rows for their tomatoes. Ellen, I see you. Did you want to do that last little bit of housekeeping stuff? And then I will take chat questions up until the end. And that way, if anybody has to get, they can get. But if you need to stay, feel free to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. McDermott. So once the webinar concludes, you will be asked to take a survey. Please provide feedback about your experience so that we can improve future webinars. You can also find the recording of this session soon, as well as recordings of the first two webinars in the series titled Planting the Fall Garden and End of Season Gardening on the CFAS Advancement website. As always, we're looking for ideas for programming. So if you have a specific request or an idea of something you'd like to see, please feel free to reach out to Amy Jo, myself, or anyone else on the alumni board or within the advancement office. So again, you'll be prompted for a survey right after this, and we always like to hear feedback from you all. So I'll turn it back to Dr. McDermott to field questions.
All right, we have like 10 or 15 chat questions, and we got about 10 minutes. We're going to get through all of them, and keep them coming, gang. So Maureen asks, what's the difference between a system like an AeroGarden and just starting growing the plants under lights in soil? So an AeroGarden, believe it or not, you fill that well in the bottom of it with water, and you pour nutrient solution in there. And when you're planting in soil, the roots are growing in soil. So one of them is purely a hydroponic system, and the other one is an agricultural system with light supplementation. But yeah, if you have lights and you provide fertilizer, you could do the same thing. You could grow lettuce, and I've done that. Like I planted a bunch of 6-packs of lettuce and let them mature under my lights and just scissor harvest them and get fresh salad. All right, multiple questions from the Q&A. Here we go. From Jeannie, what is the depth of planting spinach? I haven't had much success in the past with germination. So Jeannie, basically you plant a seed about 3 times as deep as it is in diameter. And spinach is not the biggest seed or the smallest seed. I would say you want to get it under maybe 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. And then get it moist and make sure that you have created a good flat seed bed, and make sure you firm that soil a little bit over that, which generally if you water it good, that will do that. But don't let spinach discourage you, because spinach doesn't like to germinate anyhow. That's why I overseed a little bit. Anita says, I have a small greenhouse and I'm trying to apply your info into what I might be able to plant over winter. What do you recommend, and where can I go for more info on greenhouse planting this window? So Anita, if you have a small greenhouse, that's probably an unheated one. So you're going to be able to grow similarly like you would grow in a plastic high tunnel. So contact me offline and I will put my email in here. If you guys have any questions for me. You're basically with a small unheated greenhouse, you are going to do similarly like you would plant in a high tunnel. And basically, other than that, it is going to be very similar to how we've been talking today, right? Because you're going to need to make sure that you vent it if it gets too warm. You're going to need to water it, right? It never rains in a high tunnel, we like to say. That is the difference. Is basically it's going to be like planting in a greenhouse is like planting under plastic. Okay. Let's go back to where that was. Brenda, can you go the same planting in a non-heated greenhouse? Wow, that was serendipity. So everything I just said to Anita is the same as you. You have to do different monitorings for heat. You got to do some different watering that way. But a greenhouse, a plastic, even an unheated greenhouse is going to grab much more heat than a low tunnel with row cover. For the first time I have kale, broccoli, lettuce in there. What would I plant to, where would I plant to overwinter spinach? Would those veggies likely be done so I should have spinach seedlings ready? Maybe, probably. With the broccoli and the lettuce, I would think you should be able to scavenge a little space in there, yeah. So Alana says, what should I use to shred leaves? You could run over them with your mower if you have a mower with a bag attachment on there. If you don't have a way to shred leaves, then just put them on the soil, no problem. And then Judith, what soil temp do you aim for in spring? For spinach, I am probably 45 degrees or more. If I'm doing lettuces or other things like that, I'd like it 50 degrees or more. All right, would you repeat the answer about quick soil testing? So Elizabeth, contact your extension agent in whatever county that you are in. There's an extension office in all 88 counties in Ohio. We have the ability to steer you in the direction to get a soil test, or in the example of Franklin County where I am, we actually sell soil tests out of our office. So you would call our admin, make an appointment, because we're by appointment only, and you can come in and purchase a soil test. We have a fact sheet that will assist you on how to soil sample, and then you harvest a soil sample, you put it in the envelope, you mail it to the soil testing laboratory, and you get a result. And then if you need help, we are happy to help you go through it. Susan says, I have a lot of seed packages from this year that are unopened. Can I leave them in a box in my outdoor shed? Maybe. The best way to store seeds is cool in a little bit more of an airtight, out of the light thing. They need to be kept dry, but not like bone dry. So it depends on what kind of ceiling you have in that shed. I would probably get them in Tupperware at the very least if I was putting them in there, because quite honestly, critters will eat them. Seeds are a preferred food. Ruth asks, was the webinar that was hacked earlier this week a place at a different time? Right now, Ruth, you are in it. Are there any pilot programs for hydroponics for schools or low-income families? Susan, I am in a pilot program with hydroponics in Columbus City Schools. If you have a school that you work for or work with, then I would make sure that you contact your extension educator in whatever county that you are in order to think about how you might be able to source some grant funding to get that done. Here in Franklin County, I am in a grant with Columbus City Schools and Scotts Miracle-Gro and OSU Extension and Farm to School that we are doing that in all 75 CCS elementaries. All right, how do you get the soil temperature? So Judy asks, how do you get soil temperature? So believe it or not, you can just stick a thermometer down in there. You want to go about 2 or 3 inches down, but OSU has research farms all over the state, and all of those research farms take soil temperatures, and there's a website that they publish that on. It is the OARDC weather system. OARDC weather system, where you can go on there, you find the research farm that is closest to you so that you can track down a soil temp close to you, or you can just take it, quite honestly. All right, Jeannie asks, I've always wondered what the role of microbes in the soil have in relation to growing vegetables. Are these absent in hydroponic systems? Yes, they are. So here is the reason why plants grow outside and they grow inside, and in terms of the differences in how they do nutrient uptake, because plants need those nutrients in order to grow. But plants uptake their nutrients in the inorganic form, not the organic form. In the ground, the beneficial bacteria and fungal microbes convert the organic components that make up the nutrients into the inorganic, and then the plants take them up. In hydroponic systems, they're provided in the nutrient solution as inorganic. So that is why they work both in those systems. All right, we have time for one more question. If anybody wants to sneak one into the chat right at the last minute, I'd be happy to take over that. And if not, I'm going to let my colleagues at CFAES Alumni Society Board and Advancement take care of that. So Maureen, can you save seeds from spinach? You could save seeds from spinach if you let them go to seed. They get pollinated, and you're using a heirloom or open pollinated variety. That's a great question to wrap up on. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. As we wrap up the third and final session of the CFAES Alumni Society Board Gardening Series, I'd of course like to thank Dr. McDermott for sharing his gardening knowledge, not only today, but over the past 2 webinars as well. Thank you so much for sharing through the series and your expertise. We really appreciate it. So as a reminder, once the webinar concludes, you'll be asked to take a survey. Please provide feedback about your experience so we can improve for future webinars. Amy Jo put in the chat how to connect with CFAES. So please do so. And of course, we'd love to hear any programming ideas that you have. You can find the recording of this session soon, as well as recordings of the first 2 webinars in the series titled Planting the Fall Garden and End of Season Gardening on the CFAES Advancement website. Thank you again to Dr. McDermott, and thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.